to be engaging in events. Earlier in the year, I made a joke that I probably could hook up a AFIA caravan and drive around the country and we could host fodder events every few weeks. But I guess just an opportunity for people to make some comments about what you see as the key issues impacting the industry, which ones are hitting your bottom line, and suggestions for how AFIA might tackle some of those, or things that perhaps you think we should be tackling that you don't believe's happening at the moment. So I'll open the floor to any comments, questions, or people that might want to kick us off. And I'll be worried if nobody says anything which implies the industry is all good and we can move ahead. We've got one comment about carbon neutrality.
Paula, it's Georgie Troop. I think we're revisiting again the issue relating to only the export industry paying any levy, which is contributing to the development of our industry.
Thanks, Georgie. I guess I'll just make a comment and welcome feedback on this, but I've had a few discussions with people, both that you would say are in part of our fodder industry and people outside that space, and you know, comments about, is the levy sitting in the right place? Should it be housed somewhere else, etc. I guess my comment would be, if we want to call that export levy the fodder levy, we have a fodder levy, but you know, we're well aware that GRDC, the Grains Research and Development Corporation, for example, is now investing in a far more farming systems approach. So they're actually obviously co-contributors to fodder research. We're aware MLA works closely with lot feeders and is investing in that space. Dairy Australia, obviously, very big in silage R&D, particularly here in Victoria with the department. We've had CSIRO involved in fodder-related research, particularly around our capacity during drought periods. And since I've started here, I think I'd be okay to say that I've even had some quirky proposals from researchers at universities. So I think one of our challenges is perhaps not so much who's paying for the, you know, very precise, if you want to call it, fodder levy, but have we really got a good wrap on all the R&D taking place in the fodder area, and how do we make sure that that investment is best targeted to make sure that we're, number one, getting the best scientific minds in the room to tackle those issues, but also to ensure that whoever's investing, whether you're a grain farmer or a fodder farmer or whatever, you're getting the best bang for your buck that's deriving an outcome that ultimately assists the profitability of your farm.
Yeah, and I think on that same note, as someone who is delivering investment through the, you know, that is supported by the fodder levy, it would be great from my perspective if growers were the ones that directly paid that levy rather than the exporter, because then the grower has a direct connection to the research that's been undertaken and therefore is more likely to uptake outcomes of that research, have more ownership. We certainly see that when I look side by side between GRDC investments versus AgriFutures and export fodder levy investments.
Thanks, Georgie. Other comments on that?
The levy, if you're talking about the levy that's paid by exporters, or Georgie, you're saying by the growers, the brief story behind that was you had to have 75% of whatever industry voting in favour of it to get it through the government, bureaucracy, whatever. The first instance was to look at a twine levy and to get everybody on board, included tomato farmers that use twine, etc., just seemed impossible. So it was then put, well, exporters, we wanted R&D into hay, and so it was put to the exporters to do it because it was far easier to get, far better chance to get 75% over the board. Now, my understanding, and I could be corrected on this, is that it was an exporter levy. Now, if anybody knows better, I would like to have that clarified, because that's what I thought, that it was the exporters were over the line because there weren't many of us, and we got the 75%. In fact, we got unanimous agreement, except one guy that asked, would Lewson be included, and we said yes, and that was it. It was unanimous. And my understanding is exporters pay that. Now, it would be great, Paul, if you could check on that for me, because that was my understanding of it.
I'll give you a short answer, Peter, which is I'll call you this time next week with some clarity on that.
Okay.
And I'm not being cheeky or avoiding the question. Dennis, and you might want to comment, but I think it would be fair to say there is confusion in the government, and I can confirm that there is confusion at the federal government level about this levy, and there certainly is confusion within the industry about the levy. And I think I will concur with Georgie that many farmers probably are not really aware of it because it isn't, for want of better words, in their face like some of the other levies they might pay out. Dennis, I think you unmuted yourself, so you may wish to comment.
Yeah, I concur with Peter. It's the exporters paying the levy, and that's I read the 5-year strategic plan of agri-futures today, the next 5-year plan, and that's blatantly stated in that 5-year strategic plan that exporters are paid the levy.
So I just think in this conversation it's worth noting that there are some inconsistencies in that, and in some instances the exporters are recovering from the growers, and that's standard in the grain levies and in the documentation relating to the grain levies that Levies Australia, or I think whatever the levies organisation is called. It does state that the grains levies can be recovered from the growers, but there is no comment in the fodder levy about recovering from the growers. And in some instances it is recovered, and in some instances it isn't. So that's confusion.
Look, if I may, the growers weren't asked about this. It was the exporters that voted on it, and the exporters basically have got no right to take it off the farm, and that's my view, because it was something voted by the exporters. And if the exporter is taking off the farm, they should be getting permission to do it, and basically saying, do you want to contribute here? But basically it's an exporter levy.
Peter, I will come back to you on that issue, but I think I'd probably argue, as I'm currently sitting at the moment, that the exporters possibly can't take it from the farmer, because under the legislation it states that that levy is to be paid by the person or entity that last has the fodder in their ownership before it's exported.
Exactly.
But that's actually a grey area, because if the exporter hasn't fully paid for the fodder, if they're paying an instalment, but the fodder's already been exported, then who actually owns it if it's not fully paid for?
It's where the title transfers, Georgie. So it's there's still 50 cents a tonne levy, and there's no GST applies to a levy. So, and I'm not aware of any exporter that's deducting the levy from a grower's hay payment.
So Dennis, it's happening.
So I'd like to know which of the exporters are doing that, Suzanne. So yeah.
And as I said, Dennis, it's if you're getting paid in instalments, is ownership it transferred before any payment is made, or is ownership transferred once the final payment is made legally? So, in that case,
in the grain side, with pool payments, it's always the first pool payment so not the grower's getting partially paid, title's transferred, and he's receiving the DAF levy is deducted from the grower at that time. So that's always, if it's a part payment, the first part payment is when the DAF levy is paid on the grain side. So
okay, thanks.
Thanks, Dennis. We might move on from levies if we can. This is going to be a bit strange, but I'm going to lodge an apology from Andrew Walter and read out a question from him. And his question is that he would like to see, I don't think that's how you start a question, Andrew, but anyway, I would like to see the AFIA subcommittee on transport, QEC and exporters fully operational again. So now I'll change my voice slightly and answer Andrew's question. But I think my comment on that, Andrew, is, and you might have missed it, we will have an opportunity for members to have some input into AFIA's operations. So we encourage you to state that view in there. And my only other comment would be, I think, and thank you to those who suggested we should be bold and brave in all things. I think that's our intention. But I guess certainly we've looked at not only attracting new members to AFIA, but also how do we engage those more in the startup of their business rather than more established people. And I guess if we're going to attract that younger coming into the industry type, I'm personally not convinced, although I stand to be corrected and convinced, that setting up 3 things with the same name called committees and with the same title or areas is possibly the way to go. So if we go down that opportunity, I think we need to think of new ways maybe to achieve those same outcomes. But I welcome members' thoughts and ideas into how we might crash tackle some of those issues. Cameron, I think you might have had your hand up, did you?
Yeah, no, I did put it up for, that was just part of the exporters, yeah, with the levy stuff. So moved on from that, that's all good. No, I've just heard anecdotally that on invoices or receipts or whatever, you see the levy deducted from your payment. But so yeah, but we've moved on from there. So yeah, I don't have anything to offer there too much. I think getting the members involved in things, Paula, is a great thing. I think that AFIA doesn't do that enough. They don't just lead and then lean on their members to be active in the, in the industry would be a great way for you to move forward. You just set things up and then your members be active, so setting up committees in different areas, I think, is a great idea. I know it needs structures and it takes a lot of time to put those things in place, but yeah, I think that's a great idea and I see it work in other industries.
Thanks. David, we've got a question.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm David Baker from Coonabarabran, only a brand new member. I only joined, I went down to the Elmore Field Day this year. It was fantastic. Just a little bit confused and still trying to find out why I have joined. You're all talking about export hay, and I know you in Victoria and South Australia produce a lot of export hay, but there's a lot of hay and fodder produced in northern New South Wales and in Queensland that there's no levy on or anything. And I guess if you want to get more membership, you need to see the advantages of being a member. And one of the big things I think, we need to have a universal grading of hay, universal grading of silage or whatever. Then you can actually combine your export with your domestic market.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that input. And I guess I just comment, I hope you don't think we were necessarily focused on exports, probably just more a discussion around the fact that at the moment that's the, we'll call it the main mechanism, for want of better words, by which some of our R&D is funded through that levy, but not mistaken that others do it. But we take your comment on board, and I might actually flick over, if he's willing to Kieran Maxwell, who's with us from Feed Central, just to briefly touch on that grading and sort of quality perspective, and to provide a view.
Thanks, Paula. Been a challenge in the industry, I suppose, for a very, very long time. The grains industry has a very solid grading system in place that's been there for many, many years, East Coast and West Coast as well. I suppose the challenge is there, and we've touched on export already. The exporters have their own grades to their particular markets, and they stick by those, and they price the commodity accordingly. So I suppose it's whether the industry wants a grading system or not is the major question, because as soon as you go into a grading system, you're then starting to certainly commoditize the product itself by price and by standard and by grade, and that's by national standard as well. So we've always said, you know, look, we have our own grading system. It's very advanced. We have our own laboratory, which we take very, very seriously in regards to bias testing and making sure that that's correct as well. So I suppose it's a big industry question. Do you want it or not? Because as soon as you do, it's going to give you liquidity in your market. So that's a big question for everyone. Because liquidity in your market is automatically going to then basically, you know, we always talk about growers, whether you're a price taker or whether you're a price giver. And I think within the grains industry, you know, there's a level of price taking there because there is a grade. So as soon as you go into a grade sector, you can fall into that, of course, outside of droughts and high demand.
Thanks, Kieran. Anyone have any thoughts or comments on that?
I think it's two different markets, Kieran. The domestic market, I suppose, in general, if you're talking sort of dairy or feedlot, and I could get into trouble here, you're looking at protein and energy more so, whereas the export market's on NDF and sugars, and it's got to look good. Whereas you can have something in the domestic market with no colour, fantastic CP and ME, and it can be worth a lot of money to a constant buyer who doesn't care about colour. It is two different markets. Yep,
you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you from the export to the domestic market. I mean, you've mentioned feedlotters and you mentioned dairies there. I mean, to be brutally honest, in general, a feedlotter is not overly concerned about the feed test. They're more concerned about the palatability, the aroma, the colour, and getting those animals to run to that hay as soon as they walk off that truck. So, whereas your dairy can have something a bit back on colour, and looking at the feed test results, and depending on how they're going to feed that out, whether it be in a ration or in a bunk or whatever, then they're concerned about what else is in that product and how it's going to stand together. But absolutely, definitely correct. Two markets, and you're right in regards to the WSC, you know, and the digestibility results that they're looking for, and ME. So markets are looking for different things. Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And the domestic market is certainly a lot more diverse than what the export market is.
Any other thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, Lance Pollock here in the Lockyer Valley, Queensland. Yeah, just to concur on that, the domestic market's probably 10 markets. I mean, I concentrate mainly on supplying the horse industry, and our biggest comment, saying over 50 years of farming, is I've never seen a horse buy a bale of hay yet, because the horse doesn't buy it, the owner buys it. And when you're supplying the horse market, it's all about colour and look and smell, but you know, it's not what the horse wants half the time, it's what the owner wants. But I mean, and then you supply a cattle market, it's completely different. You know, and I supply high to both. I supply them to goats and camels, and every market's different. That makes it very difficult to grade it. But grading is a big problem, especially the worst thing that's happened to the hay market, especially our market, the small square market, is the internet and Facebook, because everyone says they've got prime hay, but everyone can tell you've got prime hay, but it's not prime hay until you go and look at it. So.
Yeah, I think also the problem is with the grading system is the product we deal with, and it's a curse of our product, is that there's so much subjective to it Whereas unlike your grains and your pulses, and you've only got to look at the grain standards books that are bought out when you're doing your grain testing. They're very detailed and it's fairly easy to follow. To make that same standard within the hay industry, look, I still believe it probably could be done if you go back to those booklets that are used within the grains industry, and it could be achieved. But it's just, does the industry want it? That's the big question.
Thanks. Everyone, no more comments on that one. I just thought I'd move to a slightly different topic, but related, and that's around testing. And we've got Joe Warnes on the line from Feed Test. So, Joe, any comments you want to make about this subject or testing broadly when it comes to the fodder industry?
So we, as opposed to a lot of the labs out there that do it, we obviously just test. So we're the people that our clients that come to us are just looking for, we refer them to the AFIA grade, and what goes through our NIR machines gets classified based on the AFIA grading system that's been in place for I don't know how many years, but we've been taking it over since AgVic had feed tests. So I don't know if it's ever been reviewed or not. So in terms of like quality, that's how we compare ours, and a lot of our clients want to see that on their reports because that's how they like to. So again, that's just one of those other markets, that one of the 10 or 11 or 12 markets that there are for domestic hay, because some of our clients are just happy to have that. We've got agencies and they want to make sure that their reports that it stipulates that grading on the report. If it's an AFIA grading scheme, that's Australia-based, Australia-wide. I would have thought that it would be quite important that most labs would be following that kind of guide, just being that, you know, AFIA is meant to represent everyone. So, but again, I'm still probably fresh-faced in it, only been in around about 4 or 5 years. So, but, you know, that's just, still learning as I go.
If I can just comment there, Joe and Paula, look, I think as far as feed testing is concerned, grading feed testing is the easiest thing you could do. It's the visual grading that is the struggle within the industry, because although your visual grade can be back, you can actually have quite a good feed test. So getting a standard, a grade standard across feed testing, be it your digestibility, your protein, your ME, your starches, or whatever you want to concentrate on, and then your relative feed value, that could be reasonably achieved. And the industry and the users, I believe both end users and also producers, could probably take that up fairly easily. But it's again, going back to the visual side of things, and when we talk about visual grading, is that's the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like I said, because we're just testing it, we're not out in the field taking the samples, but we definitely obviously see them in the lab. But I mean, I've participated in it's the wheat quality WQA proficiencies, and we do so much noodle testing and making bread, and there's colour assessments and texture assessments and all that kind of thing that's done in those as well. Perhaps, you know, we already are trying to get the ring test back going, but that's just looking at quality in itself, as in the numbers, you know, what's your digestibility, what's your energy. But perhaps that's something that with support of AFIA, you could potentially look at doing that and amalgamating some kind of, you know, unified visual assessment and all those things that come into it, what be it odor, you know, all those other things. Like, I'm not over across all of them, but yeah, you could essentially, you know, you can mimic that kind of thing, and that's like the WQA one, for example, has been going on for years and years and years, and they meet again every year and reassess it and see what works and what doesn't work, and then rejig it for the next round. You know, that's a big task to do, but potentially you could get, you know, testing facilities that do it across Australia to participate in that kind of thing, as well as just the running of samples by NIR and WetChem.
Thanks, Joe. Any comments, questions, other subjects from people? Otherwise, I was going to throw a question out there and ask people what the biggest regulatory barrier or hurdle is that impacts their business every day.
That's the emperor, but can I just have one quick word on the QEC first?
You certainly may.
I've seen test results, and we've done test results with different labs in the past, and they have not matched up too well with exactly the same samples going and split 50, 50, 50, 50 until you've got what you would have to expect, pretty even samples. And I still wonder whether any labs can get close to each other with different machines, different everything, and not a common algorithm. And that has been rejected. And I understand most of it is just commercial business that comes into it. And in my view, until you get similar testing regime, so everybody's on a level playing field, we don't have a world-class testing system in Australia.
And as an exporter, Peter, though, do you think that's a concern for us?
I gave an example once, the QEC, and I wouldn't get very popular. I said we've got two people, both having dairy cattle, both bought the same amount of hay from somebody or other, and when they go back and they take it in, they were both exactly the same. One gets good results and one doesn't, based on different tests from different labs. We've seen it. I don't know what the solution is. I'm not in that space myself, and I don't think it would be easy. And I understand the commercial business parameters involved in it. But on testing done in the QEC ages ago, there were miles apart on their test results for under the same circumstances. So that's just out there.
Mike's Peter.
Sorry.
I might jump. Sorry, go.
Sorry, because I don't have my camera on. But Matt, that might be a good reason to get the QEC up and running again. Like it is running. There are ring tests going around, but publicly displaying those results again for people. You don't have to put labs to names or anything like that. I think you can still put it, but you can just see the variation. And then the labs that do participate, that should scare them a little bit if the results are really different. And so then they should work together to work out why that is and how it can become more aligned. I know, we are doing ring tests have been done. The data hasn't it's been just, I think, distributed to people within that participated in it, but it's a matter of whether that can then be, it might open a real can of worms if we do distribute it out. But they are, I believe, we are working on it. It's just got to keep going, I think.
Thanks, Joe. Cameron?
I suppose support what Joe was just saying. We were part of our lab was part of it, and I think we'd support it being publicly put out there and the like. And it's all about, like that ring testing done well, it's all using the same powder. Like when you go and get different analysis, I think, Feed Central do it well with their standards, and so do we. When you get your sample, it's how you get your sample and your consistency of how you get your sample. And then when these things are all done about the powder, so the powder is exactly the same, that's being tested. And then, we've sent ours all around the world, like to different labs as well. And, you do get differences. It's not large, it's pretty consistent, I've found, but there is little differences between the labs you use overseas as well, and the same powder that we've sent to the labs in Australia and ourselves. So, it is a hard one. But the biggest problem with, the market doesn't want it because a grading system, because we have so much low grade product that, we talked about last time, I think, Paul, we have a lot of low grade product in Australia, not a lot, but you get 10, 20%. It's just making a very low grade product, and the liquidity of that in the market is very low. So anyone who has that doesn't want to advertise that, and that's, you know, that's always been our big problem in the hay industry. We do get a large percentage of low grade product, and it's how we lift that, and the market doesn't like that being graded that way, because it's, even in grains you can always shift product, where the liquidity in hay on low grade is difficult. So there's a lot of market resistance there, as what Kieran was talking about.
So if I gave you my magic wand, Cameron, which I sometimes have with me, and you could fix what I'll call the low grade problem and drive our industry to a higher grade product, how would you tackle that task?
Sorry, Paul, I didn't understand the question. If we could get all the higher grade product up, and yeah, we'd have to have, obviously, you know, criteria around how samples are taken, and obviously that visual stuff, because unfortunately you get hay that, and especially with these rainy years, it might feed test quite well and it presents quite well, but the mold and yeast and the smell of it, animals just don't want to eat it. You know what I mean? It's very low palatability. So even though it's got a good feed test and it looks okay, when you get close to it, you can smell it. It's quite spotted, and you know its palatability is low. So so customers have got hay that is hard to do. So yeah, hard to sell. You know, but yeah, how could I change that? Yeah, it's too expensive to dry hay in a factory. So you know, it's something we just need to adapt and use. And I think the export industry does it well with blending, which is great. And it's a great way to get that product and look after their growers, which they do really well. But yeah, domestically, it just, yeah, it's a difficult one, Paula. I'll come back to you. I don't know.
Thanks, Cameron. Kieran, did you want to comment on that or not? I thought you had your hand up, virtual hand.
Sorry, I did for a second. Look, I think we kind of compare to grain sometimes, be it standards and what they do and levies and all sorts of things. At the end of the day, we make a product that is cut, thrown on the ground, and then we wait in the laps of the gods to make sure it all happens well. So at the end of the day, we can't put greenhouses over all our hay. So as Cameron just said, you know, it's an exposed product. So that's a challenge within itself. So the only thing we always say that affects our production is the season, because we are so reliant upon the conditions that are around from the time you cut it, from the time you get it in the bale. And that doesn't happen to too many other products in the world. So that will be the continued challenge.
I'd say, Paula, there's an opportunity for feed, going on from what Kieran said, like to show, like this year up on the Downs, we haven't made a hay up here for a few years, and you're seeing guys, you know, moving hay so much, tedding it out and having it out so much. So I try and get so many Queensland producers to have a look at what the southern guys do. I know it's a different atmosphere and it's easier to make high quality hay down there, but they move it a lot less and they maintain the colour a lot better, and you know, it's harder up here in the humidity. But yeah, it's a great thing for AFIA to do, to, you know, as we're making more hay up here again now, for them to have a look at what their southern counterparts are doing, who have been in really tight export orientated pricing systems and grid systems and have perfected their art. You know, there's a lot to learn. I love I'm a Queenslander and I'm a Queenslander, but we can learn a lot from our southern counterparts on making really high quality hay. There's you know, I'd love them to do more AFIA tours, as I did when I first came into the industry, and learnt an absolute truckload on making quality hay, because a lot of hay up here has been made this year with beautiful conditions and it's got no colour.
Paula, when you ask about regulatory or policy issues affecting us, certainly access to staff is continuing to be an issue with the COVID situation. Relying on, we regularly have backpackers that contribute to our business, and that's hamstrung us for the last 18 months.
Yeah, thanks, Georgie. I think we can say we share that across a number of commodity. Any other big regulatory issues that are impacting people's business, particularly those who haven't spoken so far tonight? If everyone on the line's happy, well, that's a great thing, but I can't believe it. So there have to be some more regulatory challenges. No?
So I would guess that the difficulty in export sites being registered, being accredited to export to China would come into this category, and that's major. It's impacted our business both in what we produce and also the contract work that we would normally be doing.
Thanks, Suzanne. Both of those potentially not easy challenges to solve, I might say, because obviously not all of them are within our realm of control. Colleague Pip, you have a question or a regulatory issue.
Hello, good evening. Obviously enjoying lots of the questions about feed testing and quality, because obviously that's something I work on every week when I'm talking to members right across Australia. One of the things I wanted to comment on or put out there, last week we listened to New Holland and they spoke about obviously our high density balers. One of the, obviously some of the feedback was those bales obviously can be difficult to feed out. But obviously one of the problems that we do see probably up here in northern Victoria is the transport issue. We're seeing probably more and more trucks being pulled over because they are a fraction too over height or things like that. So I think definitely, I know we spoke about transport recently, but I think probably, looking at how we're going to keep working with those high density, those bales and weights and things like that going forward with the transport industry and working with the Maritime in New South Wales and Vic Roads in Victoria and the other states, how we're going to continue to work with as we change our product, how that does heavily affect how we transport it. And obviously at the moment, we're not moving a lot of hay, but going forward, at some point we are going to be dry again and we're going to be seeing those bales moving big distances again. So I think probably that's something that, and a lot of this is coming from members that I'm speaking to.
Thanks, Pip. Any other comments, thoughts, final queries?
It's Georgie again. Sorry to ask so many questions, but
You don't have to be sorry, Georgie. That's okay.
From Western Australia, it certainly seems like the eastern states is a real boom bust in terms of the fodder industry, depending on what climate situation you're facing over there. We are blessed to have more stable climate than what you've had in the last 10 or 15 years there. And so I just wonder how much of an issue is storage. I know the mice are getting a huge amount of press over here and they're starting to be a bit of an issue here as well. But how much is storage an issue in your industry, and can storage be, if it's improved going forward, can that be the saviour of a bit more price stability going forward?
Thanks, Georgie. Comments from people? Kieran?
On the storage front, I think what we've seen, certainly growth in the growers that we deal with in market is just huge growth in storage. I mean, you're hearing growers that have B grade hay sitting in their sheds right now in quite large quantities of it. The solution is to build another shed to put the best of this year's crop in there, which is great news to hear. I think we're going to see the continued trend of good storage being built. There are incentives out there to spend money. And if we look at the grains industry as a whole over the last 15 to 20 years, especially maybe even now 25, but certainly in the last 15 years, the growth in silage storage has just been, on-farm storage has been monstrous. So I would hope and expect that we're going to see the same enthusiasm from the fodder industry and fodder growers full stop.
Thanks, Kieran.
I'm not quite convinced with that, Kieran, to be honest. Whilst I'm a great advocate for storing hay and putting up hay sheds and all that sort of stuff, in the current climate, yes, we have some good financial incentives to do so, but I was talking to a shed builder the other day and he said, like in the current climate, the sheds that were sort of $200,000, $300,000 a year ago are sort of $500,000 now. So the return on asset just isn't there in the current climate. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 12 months as to what happens, I suppose.
That's a fair comment. You've got a COVID tax on virtually everything, isn't there? So I think, Brad, I think that I think even in our hay booklet this year, you know, we mentioned the fact of that whether you're going grain or whether you're going hay, I think, you know, whether you're in both markets, storage for both products can get you through various changes or conditions within a particular market, and where you go, you know, for best returns for the property as well. So I think there are options on both sides. You know, yes, you've got growers that just have, you know, a lot of hay storage, and then their grain will go into the system. But I think moving forward, where you're dealing with both markets financially and taking advantage of either one of those markets, you do have then options both sides. So I suppose my comment of growers building more sheds to put more hay in, waiting for the next dry, and whether that's a 3-year gap or a 2.5 or 3 or 4 year gap to get rid of all of the hay. One would hope it won't be that long, but let's just say a 2-year gap on average, or 2.5 to the worst. You know, you're waiting for that next drive on the hay, but you've got both storage capacities to take advantage of either markets.
Other comments or thoughts on storage? I'm conscious of the time. Any other last thoughts, comments, burning issues people would like to raise? Or if we could give you one wish for the industry for the next 12 months, what would it be?
Give us back China.
I'm not sure my magic wand's that good, Georgie, but I guess we can try. Any other wishes from people?
No mice.
Oh, yeah, but hang on, Suzanne. We had that wonderful woman that said we should catch them and give them a nice cuddle and put them back out again.
I guess that's a great segue, Peter, because I was going to ask the question, so I will ask it now. We've just got a few minutes left, but in a former life, I came up against some of those people quite regularly with an issue I was dealing with. My question was going to be, you know, we often look to cattle and we see the live export issue and we think, thank goodness that wasn't us. And along the way, I guess we've seen a number of our agricultural issues, industries face what I'd call community challenges, or what I'd like to call issues that impact their social license, that is their ability to undertake their daily business. So as a fodder industry, what do we see? Do we have any issues in the cupboard, or are there any social license issues that we see where we may be exposed on and that we need to think about implementing plans or addressing? No?
Well, there is one. Support the wine industry and have a drink.
Some fellow AFIA directors are joining you with that celebration. We have no other social license issues. This is great. This is a great industry.
I think, Paula, that it's going to happen across all industries. You know, we were listening today to harvesting subclover and the environmental impacts of that, and what's the future of being able to do that, continue to do it. You know, it's the nature of the plant that you have to destroy the ground to get the seed that's buried. So, you know, that's just one example of that every industry is going to face challenges that are going to crop up from time to time.
Thanks, Frank. Okay, I'll open up for final comments. Kieran?
Just on that, I suppose just on that one thing is it's going to come down to the chemicals we use. It's going to become more and more of a concern. particularly for a lot of the animals that we feed, and I'll probably just pick on the exporting of box meat. If we look at the export slaughter intervals that are required for fungicide treatments, they're things that we're going to have to become more and more aware of and more on top of moving forward. That is going to become more of an issue, I think, moving forward. We talk about China. You know, we don't want anything else to be happening in other countries in regards to meat supply where a chemical has been found and suddenly Australia's been kicked out of it.
Good point, yes. Okay, on that note, if we've got no further thoughts or comments, Prue, I might get you to move to the next slide, which I'm going to do manually, but to thank everyone for your participation tonight, and also for those who've joined us regularly over the last 5 weeks. To remind everyone, if you haven't already, you've got a device called a phone, which is a camera. We'd love to see your photographs to enter our photo competition. Thanks, Prue. I guess now we sort of leave everyone knowing that you're heading into a busy time and season. So a reminder to stay safe, and on that line, our next event, while it won't be a virtual or a digital or whatever we want to call this, an online event, we are heading to National Hay Safe Day on Monday, the 25th of October, and we invite everyone on this call, and we'll be reaching out to all of our AFIA members, sponsors and exporters to actually join with us on that day, just to serve as a reminder to everyone that we must always put safety first. So we will be coming to you shortly with some more information about that day, and we are working with a few of our, I'll use the word partners, to put together some information prior to that day. Thanks, Prue. Thank you to all our sponsors, a number of whom have participated in our fodder forums over the past weeks and provided us, I think, with quite a bit of food for thought. I've certainly taken a lot away from their presentations and contributions, so we thank them, and to all our sponsors who, as I said earlier, not only provide financial contribution to AFIA, but also, I guess, we value the intellectual input they provide us and the sharing of information and opportunities. So thank you to them. And lastly, on behalf of the big team AFIA, that is the AFIA board and the staff, thank you all for your participation. We wish you well over the coming months. The board will be meeting later tonight to elect its office bearers for the 2021-2022 year. So the outcome of that will appear in your email box tomorrow with our newsletter. But on behalf of us all, we thank you very much for your participation, attendance and ongoing support. We wish you well for the months ahead, and we look forward to engaging with you again soon. And on that note, to call us at any time if you want to discuss an issue. So thank you very much and good night. Brad, I don't know if you wanted to make a last comment.
Well, Will, just on behalf of the AFIA board, we'd like to thank all of the AFIA staff for putting together these fodder forums and trying to keep the members engaged in what we're doing, giving everyone a bit of an idea on what's tracking around Australia, and I suppose just catch up in these troubling times. And we look forward to hopefully meeting again very soon. So thanks again to Pip, Prue and Paula, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. So thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.
See ya.